This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode alongside my co-host Bob Pastorella, we chat with the world's best writers about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. Today I am chatting to David Moody for a special Daddy's Boy Tangential episode in which we talk about hard left turns in fiction and in movies, amongst other things. Now, it is always such a joy to talk to David, and for those of you unfamiliar with him, he first self-published Hater in 2006 and succeeded in selling the film rights for the novel to Mark Johnson, the producer of Breaking Bad, and to Guillermo del Toro. His seminal zombie novel Autumn was made into a movie starring Dexter Fletcher and David Carradine. And Moody has an unhealthy fascination with the end of the world and writes books about ordinary folks going through absolute hell. His latest book is Shadowlocked. It's very, very good. It is one of my personal favourite books of last year, and I recommend that you all check it out. There's also a fantastic audiobook version narrated by Aubrey Parsons. So that is a little bit about David. We're going to be talking about hard left turns in fiction, as well as having a general catch-up and finding what David has been doing in the last 6 or so months since we last spoke. But before that conversation, a very quick advert break.
Are you still getting your book recommendations from TikTok? Why, when there's a book containing over 600 horror fiction recommendations written by someone who has read over 3,000 horror novels? That book is called Cracking Spines, 3 Decades of Horror by Jason Cavallero. Cracking Spines has over 30 chapters of ranked lists including Best Monster Novels, Best Folk Horror, Best Slasher Novels, and many more. Cracking Spines by Jason Cavallero is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. A brutal attack during a peaceful drive through the Irish countryside sets the stage for a grotesque tale of body horror, medical abuse, and occult conspiracy theory. Puppet's Banquet by Valkyrie LaCrue. Clay McLeod Chapman calls it a blissful injury upon the reader's psyche. Fans of Silent Hill, Hellraiser, and Cronenberg's The Brood will be consumed by its exquisite nightmares. Puppet's Banquet, out May 14th. Visit tenebraspress.com for more information.
Okay, with that said, here it is. It is David Moody on This is Horror. Dave, welcome back to This is Horror.
Oh, thank you. It only seems like 5 minutes. It wasn't that long at all that we were last talking.
Well, the last time we were talking, it wasn't 5 minutes, but it was 5 months ago. So we were talking about Shadowlocked, but as part of this series of tangentially related to Daddy's Boy podcast, we thought we would get you back on the show. And of course, thank you for such an amazing blurb for Daddy's Boy that you gave
you're
me.
welcome.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot. And as I said to you this week when we were emailing, I ended up stuck in Kidderminster. And it was the only thing that was going around my head. You know, I was supposed to be buying a new car, but all I could think about was your grubby little novel. Sorry, that was really degrading, but you know what I mean.
I think that if ever there's a book where one should just own it being degraded, it would be Daddy's Boy.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
I absolutely love what I've done. It was tremendously fun to write, but I'm not going to pretend that it's high art, even if the characters pretend that well, no, they don't pretend. They genuinely believe that the television show Naked Attraction is high art, and they say such in the text.
They do frequently, as I recall.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to say, it's probably, I can't remember when you sent it to me now. Has it got to be, it must be about a year ago, don't you think? Was it? I don't know.
It's going to be getting on for that, yeah.
Wow. So it's good to see it finally getting out into the world and putting forth the good name of Kidderminster that most
Yeah.
people who read it will probably have never heard of and never visit.
I don't know. I love the idea that it's kind of series of books that I've done, because House of Bad Memories
Hmm.
features Kidderminster too.
Yeah.
That I could put it on the map like Stephen King has done with Maine, and then can you imagine
Thing.
this pilgrimage of fans going to Kidderminster? I mean, they'd probably be quite disappointed, but if they'd read the book properly, it's like, well, I did warn you. it
I
wasn't
know.
it wasn't an endorsement for Kidderminster.
Such a strange place. And say I bought a car from a garage there. This is very boring. Nobody wants. This is a horror podcast, but nobody wants to listen to my automotive adventures. But I bought a car from there first time in about 2019. So every year I've gone back and serviced it, and I end up getting stuck there because we've gone down to one car. I haven't got a lift back. So last few times I've got out, left the garage, and then found this lovely little path along a canal. So I just wander along the canal, and then it starts to look a bit more built up. And I think, oh, this must be the centre of Kidderminster. I think, what a lovely day. It's a sunny day. I've walked along the canal, seen all the narrowboats. It's beautiful. What could go wrong? And then you go up the steps and you're in Kidderminster, and that's what could go wrong, because yeah, it's okay. It's just another Midlands town, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know exactly the path, the canal path that you walk along, and that is a bit that is not really featured in the
Yeah,
book,
it's not.
because
It's
because
not representative of Daddy's Boy.
it is admittedly one of the most scenic parts of Kidderminster, and that's something I tend to avoid exploring.
Yeah,
You know, and a lot of my memories of Kidderminster are kind of from my childhood and my teenage years, like that kind of canal path and the more delightful areas. I mean, it sounds
mm,
like a kind of paradox, an oxymoron, even delightful Kidderminster. I don't think so, but yeah, they
yeah,
they're not the heart of Kidderminster. They're not really the center. It's like, it's almost more
yeah.
indicative of Bewdley, which is decidedly nicer than
Much
Kidderminster.
nicer.
But
Yeah. But it's
um,
what you do, isn't it? You anchor your writing with what you know, and I've just done exactly the same. I think last time we spoke, I just started off serializing a novel on my kind of members only website, Kemberton, and I've been carrying on with that. But just you talking about your early memories of Kidderminster, I'm writing a novel about a little kid growing up, and he grows up in Wheelie Castle, which is a part of Birmingham where I grew up. And it's not a part that I go back to unless I'm driving very fast or passing through very quickly. But it's
yeah,
just, I think it's easier, isn't it, to kind of give that sense of reality. And we both write things that are inherently not realistic, but it's great to kind of anchor it in the places and the smells and the dodgy areas that we knew growing up.
yeah. Luckily, the books do not come with smell-o-vision, because I think if you opened Daddy's Boy and you had the Kidderminster smell, people would put it back on the
Oh,
bookshelf pretty
100%.
quickly.
Yeah. I mean, the
But
canal looked beautiful, but it had a whiff.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you go at just the right time or the wrong time, you'll probably see some discarded shopping trolleys in there too. So, not
Yeah.
mentioned in Daddy's Boy, but discarded shopping trolleys in Kidderminster canals will be mentioned in What Would Wesley Do, which is a forthcoming novella. So, there you go. As usual, whenever we talk, I seem to promote a book that has neither been announced nor is
Yeah.
available to buy or pre order anywhere. and sometimes I wonder why my sales aren't higher than they are.
Hey, look, we're in the same boat here. Not a narrow boat, just a general boat. In that it's not been that long since we last talked, so I think everything I spoke about last time, coming soon, we're still in that coming soon period. So I've released nothing else since we last spoke. So hey, let's just promote our pipe dreams again, shall we?
And you mentioned Wheelie Castle, which is not a pipe dream for anyone. Now, I'm
It's
familiar
quite
with
wrong,
the
to be honest.
yeah. I'm familiar with the legend of Wheelie Castle. It's a name that sounds much nicer and conjures up a much nicer image than the actual reality. But because we were talking about, writing about real places, but we also
Mhm.
write, the somewhat fantastical, not as a genre, but just in terms
Yeah.
of where we go, and almost that exaggerated, hyper realistic
Mhm.
portrayal. So when you're writing about real places, I think we touched on it a little bit with Shadowlocked, but how concerned are you with making it an accurate portrayal? How often do you put in a place that you know doesn't exist, but it just kind of fits the story? So, what's your
So
balance between reality and unreality, for want of better phrasing?
that's a really interesting question because for I think my first 7 or 8 books, I just completely went. Had fictitious locations. I would name check places that existed, obviously, and in my head, I was basing the locations that I was writing about on actual places. The second Autumn book, for example, takes place in the centre of Birmingham, but I never refer to it as Birmingham. I never gave it a name at all. Because I always had the concern that if you go too deeply with details, um, it can bite you on the backside. I don't know if you remember when Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film came out. Didn't it come out around 2001? And the final scene in the first teaser was Spider-Man spinning a web between the two towers of the World Trade Center. And then obviously everything happened there on September the 11th, and the whole thing had to be scrapped and redone. I may be mixing things up there, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. I think if you anchor something too solidly to something that exists and that thing doesn't exist anymore, that was my concern, that people would spend all the time reading the book thinking, well, that's not going to happen now because that building doesn't exist, or that street's been closed, or that's been pedestrianised, which is absolute bullshit when you're writing about zombies and things like that, because it's all inherently nonsense anyway. But then a few years later, I think when I got to the third Hater book, Them or Us, my in-laws had moved to Lowestoft on the East Coast, which I think you visited once or twice, didn't you? When we had little
I
mini
did for
conventions there.
the autumn in the East
That's it.
Lowestoft convention. Wow, that
Um,
brings me back.
Yeah, it's a really unusual place, and I quite liked it. It's the most easterly point in the UK, so it kind of juts out. And just because of the way that it's placed geographically, it's not somewhere you drive through to get to anywhere else. It's you only go to Lowestoft if you're going to Lowestoft. And I was writing this third book in the Hater series where things have gone really bad for our protagonist all the way through, and he's at the end of the world. And I thought, well, bingo, I know this place really well, and it was great then to put things, to anchor it so securely in reality, to talk about the specific locations, because the country had been nuked anyway, so I could do whatever I wanted with the ruins, and it was great fun. Yeah, and it was also because it's where my mother-in-law lived, and it reminded me of the apocalypse every time I spent time with her. So, but then just going to, again, talking about a book that hasn't yet been released. Dirty Day is a novel which I'm shopping to publishers at the moment, and it's real time, and it's set in the centre of London, and the story is driven by the location. There's a guy who, for various reasons, has to get from Brent Cross. So boring talking about the specific locations, from Brent Cross to Charing Cross. So it's about a 10-mile trip, half an hour. He's got an hour and a half to do it, but as you'd expect, things go a bit pear-shaped along the way. But that was the most involved I've ever got with a location, because it was literally looking at Google Earth and Google Maps and thinking, okay, so if he goes down there, that's going to cut 5 minutes off. But what would happen if there was a load of people there? Or that's taking us to Euston train station. What happens if the shit's hitting the fan over there? So I think it depends. It depends on the project as to whether I do use a real location or just make it up.
Yeah, and Dirty Day is one that I'm tremendously excited about, ever since you've kind of mentioned the premise, and I know that Dan Howarth has read it, and, he
Yeah.
keeps talking about, like, how I need to read it. It's one of the best books that you've ever
Oh, that's
written,
really
and it's
cool.
like, I know, Dan, you've told me many times, but what am I gonna do? I'm gonna hack into your computer. It's not out yet, Dan. I can't read
Well,
it yet. But
I can send you a copy. But
with
yeah, unfortunately, it's been I've hit a bit of a stumbling block. I think I've mentioned you mentioned this to you by email, but my agent, who I've had for representing me for 17, 18 years, he was enthusing about Dirty Day in a way that he has never enthused about my writing before. He was 100% behind it. We worked on it together, tweaked it a little bit, and it was just in a position where it was about to be shopped out to publishers, and sadly he passed away. So it's kind of in limbo at the moment. I don't know where it's going. I'm hopeful that my the agency that I work with will find me somebody else, and they'll take it up and try and promote it for me. And obviously, it's not the most important thing at the moment, because this poor guy, he was actually younger than me, I found out, which is quite sobering. And so, yeah, I don't know when, how, or if it's going to hit the shelves, but it's infuriating, and that sounds really pathetic because it's my agent passed away, and that's the most important thing. That's the thing that matters. But it really stings that it's this book, because it is something I'm really proud of. Even my missus liked it, and that never happens. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I'll slip a copy your way.
yeah, well, thank you very much. And it's difficult to know what to say, obviously, when
Yeah.
someone says, someone close to them has passed away. I mean, it's never an easy conversation, but it's also it's shocking how young people seem to be dying these days. Which, as
Yeah.
I'm speaking, it's like, how am I going to segue my way out of this one? Like, how does this get back into horror fiction? But I don't know if it's like, as we become kind of older, that we become just more aware of death and mortality. But it does feel like recently more people are dying younger and younger, and
Mm-hmm.
it certainly is pretty sobering, and it means that in a way it can be not motivational. That is definitely the wrong word, but it
Mm-hmm.
kind of prompts us to really live in the moment and to just get on with what we want to get on with, because we can't take anything for granted.
I absolutely 100% agree with that. And honestly, we've spoken so many times. If I'm saying the same, if you've already heard this from me, then say shut up and move on. But I had a heart attack 5 years ago. It was actually 5 years ago and a fortnight. So I can't believe how quickly it's gone. But it was I think it was one of the most important days of my life, because I went from just having a normal, well, I say normal morning. It was the start of the pandemic, so nothing was normal. I was having a pretty rancid conversation with some people in HR, at the company I used to work for. Needed to get some stress off. So went into the garage on the treadmill, had a half an hour run, got off and thought, oh, I don't feel great. And then, 2 hours later, I was in hospital. But it's the bit in between. Everything changes. You go from being from your life going in one direction to it suddenly all the what ifs and the maybes are confronting you. because if the ambulance hadn't got there in time, I might have carked it on the floor of the lounge. And the impact that it had on my wife and on my kids was really, it was incredible to see afterwards how much it had affected them, because it was the pandemic. Nobody could go with me, so it was just that. I remember Lisa saying to me afterwards, I didn't want my last image of you to be your manky feet going into the back of an ambulance. It really affected them. And it gave me the opportunity to say, well, do I want to keep doing what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it? And the answer was no, I didn't want to. So I made not a huge right turn, but I changed a lot of things on the back of that. And professionally, I think it really affected my writing as well. It gave me pretentious alert. It gave me a lot more depth and a different perspective that I hadn't had before. And it would be absolutely perverse and stupid to say I was glad that I had a heart attack. But I think my life is better for it, if that makes sense. It's very weird. But that's
it
life,
does.
isn't it? And death.
It does make sense, and I've spoken numerous times about how a few years ago with the custody battle and the divorce that I went through was unquestionably the worst time of my life. But there are certain changes that I've made, things that I've done, perspectives that I now have that I think have made me a better person, and a person who is just more in tune with what does and what doesn't matter. And I don't take anything or anyone for granted after going through that. Now, probably like your heart attack, I wouldn't say, oh, and because I'm changed, if I could do it again, I'd do everything the same. No, I fucking wouldn't. No, if I had a time machine, I would not go through that divorce. I would not have all of that happen. I would make changes. So I don't think, oh, well, I'm totally better for it. That was worthwhile. But I think, some good has come out of that. Now, whether it was because it happened or because I, in spite of it happening, made the best of that situation, you can't really say. But I think whatever life throws at me, I try to make the best of it. But of course, I wish it hadn't happened. But when it does, you know, you can't change anything that's happened in the past. You can only affect the present and the future. So you might as well just do what you can with the cards that you dealt, even though you'd wish that you hadn't had those cards to begin with. So
Yeah,
a funny
100%.
way of saying I relate.
Yeah. It's getting too depressing for the cat. Did you notice? Then
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
off.
The
Can't
cat
stand
has
this. She thought.
disappeared for the video viewers, but you have actually somehow, and I don't even know how we did it, but you've seamlessly segued us, because you spoke about, this made you take a kind of hard left turn. Well, I wanted to talk about hard left turns in fiction today, so we've got on topic.
That was a pure coincidence, but yeah, that's nice. I'll take that one.
So
And I should also say, you've got the bonus cat there for viewers. My cats are infuriating. I love them to bits, but any social media that involves a cat, I have found, I put my heart and soul into social media trying to promote my books recently, and it goes okay, and some posts go a little bit higher than others. I put a bloody cat on, a cat opening a box of books with me, or a cat, just a photograph of a cat at the end of a post, and the thing goes crazy. So it does my head in. But anyway, that's my gift to you this morning, this evening, is a little bit of my cat. She's still
the
here.
thing,
She's just not listening.
yeah, the thing is that so many people, almost universally, cats and dogs are loved. And if you don't love cats, then you do love dogs, and vice versa. Or maybe
Yeah.
you like both of them. And I'm saying this half jokingly, but half seriously as well. We were talking off air about marketing and promotion and how things have kind of got harder and harder, I think, in the last 5 years at least. But one thing that is a constant is if you put up animal photos, if you put up pet photos, people go wild for that shit. It
They
seems to
do.
be almost in any industry, in any genre, cats and dogs are loved. They are beloved. Uh, you're going to get far more engagement. So, as my kind of half serious, half joking comment, I genuinely wonder, I'm wondering about algorithms and Amazon ads and all of that. I should just buy a cat or a
Just
dog,
get a cat.
take a
Seriously, just
photo
get a
of
cat.
it, and I'm going to get more engagement.
You will. It's infuriating. And
Yeah.
after beautifully segueing into fiction with hard left turns, I'm just segueing out of it now to talk about something completely different again. But it does remind me, and it's one of the frustrations of writing. I think the fact that you spend so long working on each project and you pour your heart and soul into it, but the return, it's not about returns, it's about the art. I know that, but the financial returns are never, they never justify, very rarely justify the length of time that you put into something. And it's infuriating that you can put your heart and soul into something, it will have no impact whatsoever, and then you put your cat next to a copy of it and it skyrockets. I remember being at a convention, one of the last big conventions I did just before the pandemic, and being right at the back of this massive hall with a couple of other authors, and nobody was coming over. And we were trying, we weren't sitting there passive. We were calling people over, we were showing this, and one had got the teddies covered in gore and that kind of thing. But nobody was coming over, but they were all queuing up to see somebody who looked a little bit like Negan in The Walking Dead. You know what I mean? It's infuriating. So it's a crazy career choice being a writer, I think. And if you had your time, would you do it again? Yes, you would.
Yeah. 100% yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, yeah, unequivocal. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you say it's not about the money. I mean, for me, it's primarily about finding joy within the pursuit of writing, and that has become kind of my catchphrase for this year, really, because as I've been trying to interrogate kind of why am I doing this and what is it all about. So it is about joy, but secondarily, there is the financial concern. So
Yeah.
I think if we're primarily motivated by money in writing, number one, bad idea, many more financially lucrative careers. But secondarily, you're going to start making bad career choices, or ones that are kind of inauthentic. This is if you're doing it for the love. If you're doing it for the money, then yeah, then following the money is a good career choice. But for me, it's primarily about the art, about the creativity, about almost unlocking that childlike joy that meant that
Yeah.
I picked up a book in the first place and that I started writing stories
Mm-hmm.
myself. But at the same time, we want to look at how we're going to make money. But if there's been a few times where I've thought, right, I'll just write a commercial thriller. That's what I'll do. And, often before I've even finished the plan, I'm absolutely bored and it's soul destroying. It's not me.
Yeah.
And when I start writing it, something is ticking along, it's going okay. Oh my God, maybe we've got something commercial here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a calisthenic sex cult has turned up. Well, that's not that's not quite Hollywood. Could I remove them from the story and the story still stay intact? Probably yes.
Mm-hmm.
So am I going to? No.
No.
No, of course I'm not. I mean,
Mm.
now I'm intrigued. Now I'm invested. It's these weird things. So it is these hard left turns, as it were, that keeps me excited. And I've always thought, and a number of other people, smarter people than myself, have said, if you can entertain yourself, then you can entertain other people. And that is kind of the philosophy that
No,
powers my writing and keeps me going.
I totally agree. Yeah, I 100% agree on that. And yeah, I think I've done exactly the same as you and tried to write things which would appeal. But if you're not feeling it, then nobody's going to read it and feel it, are they? So yeah, I've done exactly the same and thought, all right, this is going to be a good commercial thriller. Started it off, and then, like you say, a couple of pages in, you think, I can't be doing with this. It's not me. I had a conversation with an accountant friend of ours a while back, and he was saying, well, just write something that's going to appeal to more people. And it was impossible for me to get it through to him, the fact that the only person it's really got to appeal to start with is me, because your enthusiasm for it, whether you're enjoying it or not, is going to come through to the reader. And I have to say that, just relating back to hard left turns again, it's happened in my career. The two books that I've enjoyed writing the most have been Hater and Dirty Day. And obviously, I don't want to talk about the twists in Dirty Day, but I mean, you can guess that it goes from point A to point 4006 in a completely different direction to how you're expecting. And Hater did the same. Hater, I was. I know we've had this conversation before, but I'm going to try and talk about it without talking about it too much. But when you get 2/3 of the way into Hater, it does something that you're not expecting. And the beauty of that for me was that I wasn't expecting it either, that I was just writing a book and I thought, okay, we're going to go down the standard lines here and this will happen and this will happen and it's the apocalypse. So we know what the next step is. But what if the next step was that instead of that? And it was just that one twist, that one decision, I think, that sold that book for me. I remember the way that I felt about it and the enthusiasm that I'd got for it after making that hard left turn. But it's how you do it, I guess, isn't it? And I think for me, the success of that one was the fact that it was a shock to me as well. So maybe the surprise and the spontaneity of it came through to the reader.
It's interesting too to hear about how that came about, because it kind of leads me to believe that our planning process is very similar. And I know that we've spoken about planning versus pantsing and what we both do. And I mean, for me, before I start writing a book, I have effectively a chapter by chapter plan. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
meticulous. I know that you have a fairly meticulous plan as well, but I often describe my planning in probably quite pretentious terms as more like a hybrid, because I've got the plan, but I've also got permission that if during the writing something else comes up, then I will go in that direction. And there's a book that I'm working on at the moment that I've only just started writing, and in the second chapter, a character did something unexpected that is already going to have repercussions for the entire novel. So I think having that flexibility, it probably is the map, as it were, to success for me. Because if I don't have a plan, then it all goes really nicely for 20 or 30,000 words. And then it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what the hell am I doing now? Because anyone can come up with an intriguing concept or a hook. But if you can't actually resolve it, if you can't do anything with it, then,
Yeah.
it's an idea, it's not a story. But if I were to plan it out in a kind of story engineering by Larry Brooks or one of those books to a
Mm-hmm.
point where I was then not allowed in any way to deviate, where I was sticking to rigid rules and archetypes, it'd be completely boring. It would be it would be kind of by the numbers. So it would then get rid of that joy of that, get rid of that spark, and I think
Mhm.
stifle creativity. So planning a book, but giving yourself permission to deviate from the plan and to then replan as a result. That's kind of the way that I do it, and it sounds like that's what happened with you and Hater.
Yeah, no, 100% it is, yeah. And I think that it can only, and I've said this before, that I think that plotters and pantsers, we do exactly the same amount of preparation and planning. We just do it at different stages. I think a pantser will just start, well, this is what I'm going to write about, and we'll go through. So from idea to published novel, they go through as much planning as somebody who does plan. It's just that we do it at different stages. I'm the same as you. I have a chapter by chapter breakdown at the start. But also I've noticed over the years in with every book I've written, it seems to me I know what the end point's going to be roughly, and I'll be following the chapter by chapter plan rigidly for a little while. But then halfway, probably earlier than that, I'll realize that that's gone out of the window. I'm not looking at that anymore. And that's because I think when you're planning the way when you plan it chapter by chapter, you're just fleshing out the beat points there. You don't get to know the characters until you're actually writing them, and you're writing the dialogue, and you're just starting to discover who they are and what they might do and how they might behave. And it was that really that with the example of Hater, by the time I'd got to the 2/3 point, and I'd got, because it's focused predominantly on a family, husband, wife, and 3 kids in a very small council flat, as the world is falling apart around them. But as I'd got to that stage and got to know each one of these people, I realised that the direction that one of them was going to take was not the direction I was expecting. And then that triggered a thought as to, well, is it is it just that one who's going to go that way, or is it 2 of them, or is it 3 of them? And it just, everything came from that point. So although I got the whole story mapped out, the hard left turn came out of the blue and just steered it into a completely different direction. But when you're well into a novel, when you're well into a book, I think you should have the confidence then in the characters and the premise to be able to go with that and to steer it away. Because I think another important thing in building in these hard left turns is not to preempt them, not to leave too many breadcrumbs. They work best when it's just completely out the blue for the reader or the viewer or whatever. I think there's an example that I often talk about here is it Ben Wheatley's film Kill List, that
I
you
love
watch that,
giving that one as an example. Yeah.
yeah, and you know where it's going, and then it doesn't, and it's like, what the hell was that? And it's just absolutely brilliant. The left turn it makes in some ways is better than the film itself, if you know what I mean. It's just the confidence to do that and the logic to do that. It's fantastic. But if he'd been dropping breadcrumbs along the way, if he'd been leaving us clues as to what might happen, then we kind of get into Shyamalan waters, and that's not a place that's not waters that I want to swim in particularly. I think then
Yeah.
you're expecting the twist. And I never want to get to the point where people are reading my books thinking, oh, yeah, well, I think it's going this way, so inevitably it means it's going to go that way. You've always got to find new ways, I think, of catching people out without trying to be too clever about it. It needs to feel realistic still, or the plot twist needs to feel believable and not crowbardy, I think.
Yeah, well, if you leave too many breadcrumbs, then there's an argument that it's now not a hard left turn because you've set it up
Yeah.
too
You've
much.
indicated you've gone down the gears, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess with me, I mean, there's numerous left turns within my fiction. I mean, definitely in House of Bad Memories, I would say it changes genre 3 times throughout the course of the novel. And in Daddy's Boy, I mean, can we even say it changes genre? Because did it even have a fucking genre to begin with? I'm not sure. It's almost like a
No.
genreless story, but there's definitely elements that people didn't predict. And I guess for me, like I typically I will put some foreshadowing in, so some breadcrumbs, but perhaps they are only breadcrumbs to me, and it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
that is pushing it to suggest
Yeah.
that that was, foreshadowing. It's like what you had a Morrison's packet of sausages in the background, and you thought that was going to foreshadow the
No.
final act. No, Michael, that's not
we-
foreshadowing. But
Weirdly, I was going to say the only consistent things in Daddy's Boy is sausages and naked attraction.
yeah, that's true.
The
That's
rest of it
absolutely true.
is beautifully mad because you're thinking, where the hell's this going? And where you think it's going isn't where it ever goes, and that's great. That's really refreshing, and I love reading it for that reason. It's just that you don't know, you have no idea, and it almost gets to the point where you think, how crazy is this going to get? How mad is this going to get? And it's not a spoiler to say very mad.
Yeah, no. And I think, already I'm seeing from the early feedback and from some early reviews that it is divisive. That's
Mhm.
not a shock to me. I didn't think
Yeah,
when I wrote this, oh, this is a middle of the road book that most people will be like, yeah, it was okay. I knew that it would get polarizing reactions. And yeah, I mean, as you say, it's like, upping the ante. It's getting madder at certain points. I mean, most points throughout the text, and for some people, they're going to go along for that ride, and for others, it's like it's too much, and there's going to be a point where
Mhm.
they have to tap out. And to those people, I obviously thank them for taking a chance on it, but it wasn't for them, and that's fine. You know.
Yeah, and I get that. I think my approach to bad reviews or people who don't like my book is that it's still, if it's prompted you to write a bad review, then it's had an impact on you, and that's the little positive that I take from them. But you're absolutely right, and you can't appeal to everybody. And I remember, again, just going back to Hater, I remember one day two Amazon reviews appearing within minutes of each other, and just to paraphrase, they literally said, the first one said, "Crap book, great main character." The second one said, "Horrific main character, great book." You just can't. You're never going to appeal to everybody, and nor should you try, because as we were saying earlier, the person that you want to appeal to most of all is you, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's interesting too because you were saying you'd never want to go the kind of M Night Shyamalan route and people anticipating the twist at the end. And I'm 4 books in at this point, and one
Yeah,
thing that I do seem to be seeing consistently, and particularly from the last 2 books, is people saying they don't know where I'm going to go, or it went in an unexpected direction. And to a point, I'm wondering, this could become the thing that people expect. It's like they
yeah,
expect the unexpected from me. And so in a way, it's like if I were to respond to that, then probably the most unexpected thing to do would weirdly be to do the expected, but that's not going
yeah,
to be a very
yeah,
satisfying thing. But when what I want to do, as we said, is entertain myself primarily, but also I'm not interested in really doing something that has been done before.
hmm,
Of course, every story to a point has been told before, but it's
yeah,
the manner, it's the mode, it's
hmm,
those little creative flourishes along the way that kind of make it unique or make it that writer's storytelling, their voice, their way of doing things. So often I'll think, well, Where are the most likely places this could go? What would be perhaps the generic or the archetypal way? Right, I'm not going to do that. What is left? And obviously, my mind works in a way where what is left is not the answer that a lot of people would have given. They're like, well,
Yeah,
I didn't think six men lining up and having that contest was what was naturally next. But you
I
know,
think,
it's yeah, just let's do something different and and see what
yeah,
happens.
and you can do it. Yeah, when you do it right, it really hits home. I think. Um, a film that I talk about a lot is Threads. Have we talked about it before? I can't remember the BBC nuclear um,
Oh,
drama from 1984.
yeah, it's been a long time since I've
It's
watched that. Yeah.
it's an incredible film, and I think many people hold it up as the most frightening, harrowing film ever made, and I would agree with that. I think it's just astonishing. But I maintain that a lot of the reason that hits home so hard is because of the way it was written by Barry Hines, and that was to have the first half, the build up. We know what's coming. We know that well, you know from the front cover of the Radio Times that week with the traffic warden with his bandaged face that it's a film about nuclear war. But it's the way that he it anchors it all in normality. The first half of the film almost is just it's almost Coronation Street without the over the top drama. It's just very kitchen sink. It's very straightforward. And then the bomb goes off, and all these people that you've really got to know, and you really have got to know because they're so familiar to you, they go through absolute hell. And that has always been something that I've tried to do with my work. And it's there's a really old Barry Hines drama from the 70s. It was a two-part. Um, I think it was ITV. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was about a colliery, about a mine in Yorkshire. And the first episode is very light and bubbly, and it's in the 70s, so they're very proud of where they work, and they've had a letter to say that the Duke of Edinburgh, so Prince Philip, is going to come and visit the colliery in a couple of weeks' time. And so everything's, oh, let's get this. You get the bunting, you organise the cakes, you do that, you get that. And then you get to the second episode, which you assume is going to be about this lovely royal visit, and you're thinking, do I really want to watch this shit? And you start the second episode, and all the people who've been getting ready for this visit are killed in a cave in a cave in, and then it's the response to getting those people out, and it just goes in a completely different direction, yet a completely plausible direction, and it's stunning the impact that it has. And I was thinking about what we were saying about my heart attack a while back. That day to me was just a normal day when I was going to be getting on with my work, and it suddenly went in a completely different direction. So those kind of left turns I think are absolutely fascinating, and I love to explore those. So they're plausible left turns that could happen, but you just don't expect it and you don't see it coming. It opens up a world of possibilities, I think, for a writer.
Yeah, and you were talking as well. I mean, in terms of the impact of the heart attack on your life, in terms of like kind of your future life and what you would do going forward. That it sounds like to a point it's made you kind of rethink how you write. But as you said, you're including hard left turns, like kind of from the start of your career with things like Hater. But perhaps this has kind of infused you to go further, or to kind of care less when you're writing about norms or what people might expect or
Yeah.
anticipate. So how has it informed specifically the stories that you're writing and the way in which you're writing them?
I think it made me drop some of the guardrails. I think I was before the heart attack, and I don't know whether it is just because of the heart attack or because of everything that we all went through at that time with the pandemic and complete changes to our lives. I think it just made me like drop the guardrails, as I said, and just think more. obliquely, maybe. I've always been envious of people like David Lynch and some real visionaries who will just write something and create something, and you think, well, why did you think to put that with that? Because I was always trying to over-explain things, and I used to tie myself up in knots and abandon stories because I couldn't get them to make sense. But they don't have to make sense, and I think that's what changed within me. I think I was always looking to reason things out. The autumn books, for example, I wrote because I wanted to write a serious zombie novel that with rules that kind of made sense, which is ridiculous for something as inherently unbelievable as a zombie apocalypse. But I found that the longer that went on, the more I tied myself up in a nuts. Well, that character can't do that because this happened, and you just get too prescriptive. So I think that one thing that the heart attack did is to kind of take the shackles off a little bit and just think, well, there's no reason why that couldn't happen, and I don't have to explain that, or I can just make something else up to explain that. Do you know what I mean? It's just made things a lot freer and a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable as a result.
And do you think, I mean, it's almost a paradox, but there's been a creative freedom because of, I guess, the impermanence of life and our mortality. But then on the other end, have there been more commercial considerations when you think, at any time you could die and you want obviously your family to be secure as well? Is there that battle that it's kind of
Yeah,
infused?
kind of. But I always think, and this sounds bad, I know it does, but I just think of artists and often musicians who become famous after they've died. And I just can't help thinking that's going to happen. I always say to the kids, you're going to do okay. Just keep an eye on my literary estate, because I remember there's a character in one of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books who is dying is a career move for him, and he suddenly goes stratospheric, and I could see that happening. Yeah, I don't know. They're impossible questions, aren't they? Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. It's
When
early for
you
you,
put
it's late for me, and I've lost my way.
I mean, when you put it like that, it's surprising that there haven't been more people who have faked their own death, But
Yeah,
I could imagine, and now it's like, oh, it could be quite a funny story idea. It's like, so you decide to fake your own death, and then you're the one person who's like, yeah, nobody gave a shit. And just like the sales plummeted.
yeah,
They were like, yeah, good. Or like you're faking your, this is took a dark direction, and this is just the left turn of my mind. You fake your own death. You expect to see some kind of Edgar Allan Poe, like the estate, the stock is rising, and instead what happens is some scandal that you know not to be true comes out, and now you're being cancelled like you're Jimmy Savile. And now you've got
yeah.
this
Left being
dilemma,
brave.
haven't you? Because you're not actually dead. So
Yeah,
what do you
yeah.
do? So
There you go. There's the next novel for you.
I know,
You've
yeah.
done with that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, shouldn't have said that aloud, but don't worry. I mean, it's not an idea that someone can copy because there's going to be a hard left turn in there. I don't know what it is
Exactly,
yet,
exactly. But I guess
but I'm
the death of a character is an ultimate hard left turn, isn't it?
yeah.
I always find that interesting. I remember writing one of the early autumn books, and there were a lot of characters involved, and I could afford to lose a couple. And I remember just really dismissively killing one of the main characters from the book before. It was just, oh, he didn't make it. Oh, he got shot. It was just something really refreshing about not having to go through the climactic death scene. Sorry, I've got a cat back here now. And just being able to just throw it away in the way that it happens. People get hit by buses, and people have accidents, and people have heart attacks. And in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, somebody who we thought was going to be a key character could just get killed with friendly fire or something ridiculous, and his body ignored. And I just think it's interesting. So I guess what I'm saying is that the key, I think the key to a hard left turn is avoiding the cliches. That's what you're doing, isn't it? You're steering away from the cliches and going down an unpredictable route.
Yeah, and it certainly makes more satisfying reading and watching as well. You talk about you spoke about David Lynch, but I mean,
Yeah,
part of the excitement was just not knowing what the fuck would happen in any film at any given moment. And that's before we even talk about like the masterful cinematography and
yeah,
just the way that, I mean, the guy was a genius, an absolute genius. And
yeah.
I mean, you could hear him as well kind of talk about anything, and you'd learn so much about storytelling and structure probably from him just giving the weather report, which he did
He
often, in
did
fact.
every day. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think he's just absolutely remarkable. I remember I was late to the party with the final Twin Peaks series, the series he made 20 years after, so many years after the originals. I watched the original. Slavishly, I watched every episode of that twice, I think, and then bought the box set and rewatched the whole lot again, and then went into Twin Peaks: The Return. And that whole thing is a hard left turn, isn't it? It bears, I don't know if you've seen it, but it bears so little relation to Twin Peaks as we knew it. Okay, some of the faces are familiar, but they're behaving in unfamiliar ways. And if you're going in there just expecting a continuation with all the tropes that they developed in the original series, you would have been very disappointed. But if you'd gone in there wanting to be entertained and scared and provoked, then it hit all the buttons for me. It was absolutely astonishing. It was astonishing how different it was and how free it was of everything that had come before, I think.
Yeah, but I suppose as well, if he'd have wanted to do a kind of third season of Twin Peaks kind of originally and in that kind of mode, then he would have done it, 20
Yeah,
or so years ago. So,
yeah,
well, I even forget how the project came about, like how it came to be that after so many years, he was like,
yeah.
right, we're gonna reboot Twin Peaks. But I love that kind of bravery and that fearlessness of just being like, you know what, I'm writing a sequel to this.
And that's it. And that's what I think that's what I used to really lack. It was just the confidence, I think, to take these left turns, to go and do something that's so out of your comfort zone or so unexpected. And but it's really rewarding when you do it. And again, just going back, trying to sell a novel that I don't know when it's going to come out, but Dirty Day, the development of that was pretty much for me. It's my peak left turn book. There's so many left turns in it; it almost does a circle and goes back to the start. It's you know I know we've used this cliche before, but a story for me is just a succession of things going wrong, and a left turn is just something going wrong in a very unexpected way. And yeah, I think it's great when it's done right. It's incredibly powerful, and I think not only does it add a huge amount to the story, but it also kind of cements it into the reader's mind. It gives them a hook. Oh yeah, that's the book when that happened. Oh yeah, do you remember that scene? But I think it's really important to temper it and not crowbar it in and not making it that it's so ridiculous. I think a hard left turn still has to be believable to an extent, in as far as anything we write is believable.
And I mean, it sounds like from what you say about Dirty Day as well, that it's very much a natural follow on from Shadowlocked, because I mean that's a thriller, but a thriller that perhaps doesn't
Yeah,
it's not what you imagine when someone says here's a thriller, but it certainly fits into that genre better than any other
yeah,
genre. But there are left turns, there's unreliability, there's unpredictability, And it kind of sounds like you've done all the things that people loved about Shadowlocked and almost turned it up to the next level with Dirty Day. You know, I wonder too if like writing Shadowlocked then gave you the confidence, as it were, to go even further with Dirty Day.
I mean, I hope that's the case. Writing that book was a revelation for me. That Shadowlocked, it had been knocking around in various forms for so long, for decades. Excuse me. But yeah, I never felt able to write it and do it justice in the way that I did. And that was another one where I'd got a story, but it took a real turn. And again, without going into too much detail for people who haven't read it, it's the unreliability of some of the people in there, and that you're taken down a path, and then you get to a point and you think, oh, hang on a minute, is everything I've been told right? Because perspective is a really interesting thing to play with, and that was the whole twist with Hater. It's just flipping the perspective a little bit. Because I think, you expect your main characters to behave in a certain way and to fulfill a certain function. But I guess the main character is not always the main character, if you know what I mean. It's the that their behaviours tell you more about somebody else, or you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and the other book as well that you're writing at the moment that you mentioned at the start is, of course, Kemberton, which you're serializing. So you're writing it and then fairly immediately putting it out to the people who subscribe. So, I mean, first of all, at this point, how many chapters into it are we? Do you know roughly, at what chapter it's going to end? And how has this approach differed in terms of the way that you go about writing? Has it meant that you've taken more hard left turns because people are seeing it as it comes out? So then if you've got yourself into a hole, you can't really go back and change something in chapter 3 because that's available. Or have you actually taken less left turns because knowing that people are reading it, do you feel constrained that you don't want to accidentally go in a direction that you can't get out of?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting one. We're on, I think, chapter 21 is online at the moment. There are 4 chapters going on next week, and it's usually 3 chapters a month, but it's 4 chapters for a very specific reason. I should just say to anybody listening who wants to read it, it's just subscribe to my mailing list, and you'll get a password to this website, which has got various exclusive things for mailing list members, and Kemberton being like the main event at the moment. In terms of its structure, the book was kind of planned out. There are left turns in it, but they've been choreographed. But you won't see them come in. I can honestly say that it's not the book. It's not the book you think you're reading. Whether it will be fully successful or not, I'm not entirely sure. I've enjoyed it. I'm getting great feedback from it. But it's just so different to my normal writing process, because I've reached the stage now that I was talking about earlier in the conversation when we were talking about planning and pantsing, that you get to a certain chapter, a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, when you realise, oh, I'm not looking at my guide notes anymore. And I think I've got to that point. I know where it's going. I know where it's going to end. But it's going to be a bit hairy getting from where we are now to that end point. I think ultimately it will work. It'll be good. It's going to be a lot shorter than I was expecting. I think it's only going to come to about 50,000 words, and I was hoping for 70, 80,000. But I know that after it's done, I'm going to take it away and rewrite it again. But I really like the immediacy of getting something out there, and not waiting months and years, and not the whole point of it was, I find it really difficult to kind of sustain a presence online when I've got nothing to tell people. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to keep going on. I will keep posting about the books I've already written. I will keep trying to get people to buy stuff that's already there and attracting new readers. But I want the long-term readers to have something more regular from me. So I thought, let's give them this book in bite-sized chunks and see how it goes. It's been great. I've absolutely loved it, and I've got the basis of a really good novel, I think. And I think I'll probably repeat the experiment because it's a great way of keeping new stuff flowing. I think without having to just disappear completely and spend 6 months to a year or 2 years or longer writing a book in kind of radio silence. But yeah, it's been an experience. I hope people will enjoy it. This is the key. This is the key month now in terms of the story. This is the hard left turn coming up, and it will be left on a cliffhanger. It's usually just 3 chapters. There you go. I don't care what happens at the end of the 3rd chapter, but I'm posting 4 chapters this week because at the end of the 4th chapter, something happens, and then the story goes in a very different direction to what people were expecting. I think. I hope. I'm not going to say any more about it.
Yeah. So we didn't plan it like this, but this is actually the ideal week then to be talking
100%.
about
Kemberton
and what a topic, hard left turns is.
Yeah.
I mean, this sometimes happens with writing as well. You don't plan for it, but there's just this synchronicity.
Mm-hmm. I love that word. That word crops up a lot in my novels because that's we're talking about these hard left turns and we're talking about stories being a succession of things going wrong, and often synchronicity is involved, isn't it? It's that thing happening at the same time as that thing, and it's the effect of the 2 things together, the synchronicity of them. I think it's great, brilliant word.
And is Kemberton the only thing that you're writing at the moment, or do you have simultaneous novels going on at the same time? Specifically because you're doing this one for a live audience.
I need to start a new novel. I'm really struggling. I think when we spoke last time, I was telling you about a series that I've been planning for a decade now, The Spaces Between, because Dirty Day is a kind of prequel to that. So I'm planning that it's going to be a 5-book series. I'm also trying to write another novel, which is a standalone book, but also related to Spaces Between series. But what I'm really itching to do is just go and write something standalone. I just want to write something really scary because I haven't for a long time. So I just want to write something really eerie, something that really freaks people out. I haven't found it yet. So I've kind of been sitting here just messing around on the internet and doing admin and stuff without actually writing anything because I've just got this. It's at the moment it's just a kind of swell of ideas and different influences that I'm trying to coalesce into something that's going to be worth writing. But I do just really fancy stopping everything else and just writing a frigging terrifying book. That sounds ridiculous, but you know what I'm saying. It's just yes, that really you were talking about being having written Shadowlocked and the impact that's having on other stuff. I think I've really got into the habit of enjoying writing good standalone thrillers. I say good. I don't know if they are good. I think they're good, but yeah. So I really want to write something with more of a horror tinge to it than I have been doing for the last few books.
I think they're good too, and Dan Howarth does. So there's 3 people right there. That's a good start, isn't it?
If you 2 like them, I'm happy.
Yeah. But no, I know what you mean about just wanting to write something just really scary and terrifying. And I'm sure at some point I'm going to do that. And then that'll almost be like the career left turn. Because, it seems like I've unintentionally been going more and more in this kind of comedic direction. And one day I just have to write something. It's eluded me so far where it's like, no, this is just pure terror. There's no jokes in it. This is just messed up. And I'm not in that headspace yet. I think it occupies a different headspace as well. I think it's maybe it's maybe harder because if you're writing something terrifying, it almost drains you. So ironically, I need to be in a really happy and healthy place to write something really depressing and bleak.
Yeah,
Because if my life is depressing and bleak and I'm writing something depressing and bleak, that's too much. There's too
yeah,
much for a human to endure. So,
yeah, and I agree with that. But I think there's another side to it as well. And over the years, a lot of people have said to me, "What's wrong with you? Why do you write this stuff? It's disgusting. It's really it's so." A lot of my stuff, the dystopian stuff in particular, there's no hope in it. It's grim. It's relentless. Why do you do it? And I think the answer for me is I'm getting it out of my system a lot of the time, and I find it therapeutic to write about worst case scenarios. Because then you step away from the computer, no matter how shitty things are at home, you look around and you think, well, at least I'm not there. At least it's not the zombie apocalypse, or at least we're not. I was going to say, at least people aren't ripping themselves apart for no real reason other than ideological beliefs, but kind of they are constantly. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've said before too that, I mean, the kind of flip side to what I said is that if I am in a really dark place and then I'm writing about really dark stuff, then I can almost channel some of that raw emotion. And so then it becomes more authentic. So it can be a good place for good art, but it can just take its toll on me, like physically and mentally. And
Yeah.
I mean, while I was writing Daddy's Boy, I was also writing this really dark thriller that was like a little bit hopeless and about fractured
Hmm.
relationships, but in the end, kind of Daddy's Boy took over, and that was the one that I wrote. And actually, that was completely the correct decision for me at that time.
Yeah.
It was so cathartic too, because I'm going through this difficult time, but then every day I'm getting to the computer and I'm like making myself laugh. I'm like making jokes about Andy Peters and Des Lynam, and how is that not fun? That was
Yeah.
definitely a good time for me. So hopefully the reason that so many people are finding joy and absurdity from Daddy's Boy is because that's what I was feeling too. It's
Yeah.
almost like this kind of telepathy where I'm giving to you what I was feeling during the writing.
100%. Which takes us back nicely to the start of the conversation, doesn't it? Because that's what we were talking about. You're writing something, you've got to write it for you first and foremost. And you've got to want to read it, and you've got to want pleasure from it. I know that I recently re-released an old book, Strangers, and I went back and re-edited it and added a short story and various other things. And I wrote that when I was depressed, and it was a hard slog to read it again, because it reflected my state of mind at the time, which just wasn't good. Um, but yeah, I think we can still write grim things when we're happy, can't we?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Well, let's
and
try.
it's interesting. Like this is another reason why sometimes I want to try to write a book quickly, because actually this thriller that I mentioned, it has sat on the back burner for a while, and occasionally I start revisiting it, but because I'm not in that frame of mind, it's a little bit harder for me to, I suppose, recapture some of it honestly.
Yeah,
um and also it just makes me more aware of like some of the flaws of like the main character and the writing, and it's almost like, god, that may be a little bit too hateful. I know that
hmm,
it's an honest depiction, but this is a lot to get someone to read that. But then particularly for me, it's like, well, what's the balance? Because I can't be like, okay, well, write it in Daddy's Boy mode. Well, no, then that would be completely farcical for the tone
yeah,
required. So it's just
yeah,
finding, okay, what is the voice? What is what is the entry point? And I think that people enjoy reading about kind of flawed characters and reading about, reprehensible characters, but there does need to be some sort of spark or some sort of hook or maybe some
Yeah,
charisma or some incompetence, because if you're just reading something so bleak that it's the literary equivalent of a Lars von Trier film,
yeah,
for some people it's gonna work, but it's asking a lot. It is
it is.
asking an
No,
awful lot.
you're absolutely right. And again, I think that's why I think it's so important to get to know the characters, because you've got to make them. Danny McCoy in the Hater books does some pretty horrific things during the course of it, but because your relationship with him has already been established as this frustrated family man with a crappy job working for the council, very familiar, I think you can go with him to an extent. But yeah, I'd find it difficult to write somebody who was outwardly vile from page one to page whatever you get up to.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to have that kind of transformation. It's like, well, you've already followed him this far. You might as well see
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happens next. And I mean, back to Kemberton. So, you said it's probably going to come out at 50,000 words, then you'll
yeah.
rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that obviously the kind of state of things for you in flux with your agent passing away.
Yeah, yeah,
To state it mildly, in flux. It's like it's
yeah.
fucking dead. It's a bit more than
Yeah,
in
it's not
flux.
influx for him, sadly. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you think will be the steps after? Do you think that will there be reluctance, I suppose, from agents and publishers to put out a book that has already been out in some form? I mean, it worked okay for Chuck Palahniuk, and it's worked okay for Haruki Murakami, at least with early
Yeah.
chapters of the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. But I'm not sure kind of what agents are thinking and what the state is at the moment.
It's difficult to answer that question because I think but Hater and the Hater and Autumn books had been independently published before they came out. So before they were released by Thomas Dunn Books, St. Martin's Press in America. So I've been through that. One of the reasons that I like to publish independently is because I enjoy it, because I like the freedom of it. I like being in control of it, and I like the immediacy of it, which is, I'm really obviously it's understandable what's happening with Dirty Day, but even if I get another agent within the agency and who then shops it around and sells it, it's going to be like 12 months, 18 months, 2 years before it hits the shelves, if it hits the shelves in that way. And I find that really, really hard to deal with, the fact that I've got this book that I love, that people have really enjoyed, and it's not out there. It's different if somebody says, "Yeah, we'll publish that, and here's your advance money," because that makes it a lot easier. But I don't know if that's going to happen. So I think with Kemberton, I may just, depending on how things work out, may just release it independently just to keep things going. I'm also very wary about disappearing for a long period of time, which is, as I said, that's the reason why I've been releasing Kemberton in the way that I have done. The fact that I want to stay visible. And I think when this book's done and I take it away to do whatever I end up doing with it, I'll start again. I've got an idea for another book that I want to serialize in the same way and just see where it goes. And it might be something that I always do. I quite like having more than one project on the go, because there are some days I think when you're just not in the headspace for a particular book, and it's frustrating trying to force yourself to write, and sometimes it works, but not always. And I find it refreshing and beneficial to be able to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that one today. I'm going back to this one. It's good. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you flexible. So yeah, I don't know where it's all going to go. Obviously, this could all change again next week, and I'm in contact with the editors that I've worked with previously. So there's a chance that, even if I don't end up with another agent, that I might be able to approach them, and they might be interested in taking something on. But I really, honestly, it's so, as you said, in a state of flux. I don't know where it's going to go. I think I'm just going to keep all my options open and see what happens.
Yeah, and I certainly like as well the idea of at least putting out, one book per year, as you say, just to keep people kind of interested, to
Yeah.
keep providing something to the readers. And
Mhm.
yeah, it does create, particularly when independently publishing has never been as easy as it is right now. It does
Yeah.
create this dilemma, because it's like, well, you could wait for that deal, but then your book is out in 2 years. And even, in fact, the small presses, I find, are having longer and longer wait times.
Yeah.
If you get signed by a small press, then it's probably going to be about a year, which seems to be certainly longer than it used to be. I know some that, what they're commissioning now, they wouldn't be out till 2027, which for me, then there's no point, because I got to balance the different things, like the immediacy, the money, the
Mhm.
marketing, all sorts of bullshit that has to be
Yeah. No, you're absolutely
considered.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I
but
think. Yeah. So I feel a little more fortunate now that I've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and I've got a decent back catalogue behind me. So I know that I have a promotional spreadsheet that I look at every day, and I do try and every um, few days just put a tweet or whatever they're supposed to be called now, or just put something on Facebook or Instagram just to promote an old book. So it's possible to keep things going like that, but I also feel guilty just pushing the same old shit again and again and again. I want new stuff for people to read. That's why I do this. I don't want to be like a used car salesman. I want to be selling new cars, planes,
yeah,
spaceships, whatever.
yeah, yeah, no, it makes sense. And, so I feel less anxious, I suppose, when I've just released a book, which is the case, right now, of course, with
Yeah,
Daddy's Boy, because it's then like, right, well, we've got a year or so until I feel like, oh, there absolutely needs to be
yeah,
another one. But, I've got this novella I mentioned, What Would Wesley Do? That's ready to go. That's with a publisher at the moment. So
mhm,
if they decide to take it on and they make the right offer, then, great. And it doesn't really matter at this point if they say, oh, it'll be 2 years, because I know that, well, I've just released this one and I've got another
yeah,
2 to 3 projects that I'm working on. So that there's
mhm,
definitely time in that regard. But if they don't take it on, then there's almost a temptation to just put it out at maybe even at the end of this year, because it's like, I've got this book. Is there
yeah,
any point waiting? I know, like, of course, like, I think if you were doing like 4 or 5 books a year, then it would be like, well, maybe there is point waiting, because you don't want to
mhm,
oversaturate it. But I think 1 to 2 books is like perfectly kind of manageable for readers and for that
yeah.
schedule.
I think that's ideal. I think independently published books that I've released, they seem to have a 6 month peak, if you know what I mean. So you get your pre-orders and everything, you put the book out, and then for me, they seem to trail off after that initial push seems to trail off after 6 months. So I would love to be in a position where, as I'm approaching that 6 months, here's the next one, and just keep it going like that. Um, so yeah, we'll see. If I go the other route and Dirty Day ends up with a traditional publisher, then I think I'll just try and knuckle down and just get new books in the bag, so that hopefully they'll take those on, and then we'll be back to a book a year, which is which is okay. I'm fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, where I don't have to. The kids have left home and the mortgage is paid, so it's not the pressure that it used to be. My very first editor, he said, at St Martin's Press, he gave me 2 nuggets of financial advice, which always stuck with me. First one was, don't anticipate the next advance check, because it might not turn up, and it's all too easy to do when you've been going for a while and people have been throwing a bit of cash at you. You think, oh well, they'll buy the next one, and they might not necessarily. But the key thing for me was, you can pay bills with money that you've made from a book, but it's really hard to write a book to pay bills. You see what I'm saying? It's totally different. Yeah, you can get your cash from Amazon or your publisher or whatever at the end of the month and do whatever you need to do with it, but you can't think. I can't think, oh, I need a new car or whatever, I'll write a book. It doesn't work like that.
If only it was so easy.
If only it was so easy. It is so easy for some people, just not most of us.
But I mean, to be clear as well, I mean, for me, particularly at this early start in my writing career, I do want to land a big publisher. That would be the dream at this point, because I know it would give me the reach. It would give me, certainly more financially. Though for people listening, it might not be as much as you imagine. Some of these advances, particularly for a starting author, they're fairly modest. Don't quit your day job just yet. But because I find the reach is the kind of most difficult thing right now. I think I've said numerous times before, I'm sure that there's a demand for the type of fiction that I'm writing, but the trick is finding the readers, finding
100%.
where they are, because they're all situated in these little bubbles around the world, just these group of people. They want to read dark comedies about naked attraction and sausages, but there's not a naked attraction and sausages section in Waterstones yet.
No,
for some reason.
There's barely a fiction section in some Waterstones, so
Yeah, but I'd love to do kind of that model where you've got the big publishing deal. So you have to wait the 2 or so years, but then maybe you're putting out a novella every year as well on your own independent press. And it seems to be a good way to do it. But at least for me, whatever happens, I'm doing this podcast, so I'm not. People know that I haven't disappeared. If there's not been a book for a while, I'm still here.
Absolutely.
At least. Yeah.
No, I was thinking that earlier. What a great thing it is for you, the fact that you always talking to authors. The number of emails I get from This Is Horror saying, "Oh, we're taking questions for so and so, and we're doing this with whatever," and I think the number of opportunities you have to get your mug and your voice in front of loads of people is great. It's fantastic. It's something that I'd love to do, but you're very good at it. I'd be very bad at it, so I'm not. There's going to be no competition for from my perspective for a podcast.
Well, I suppose I'm relieved to hear it. Then I'll continue to not feel threatened. A David Moody podcast might be coming around the corner. It was always a fear, but thank you for confirming that you've signed some sort of no compete clause. So good.
It would just be terrible. Honestly, I don't even want to go there.
Yeah, but I've said before, one of the reasons why I started the Michael David Wilson Patreon was to get some separation between This Is Horror and my author presence, because I mean, it is great, obviously, doing this week in, week out, but that there's not always crossover. And I think as well, particularly as I'm writing more comedic stuff, I don't want to be inadvertently dishonest to people, because I think people do assume, if they're not looking at the blurb or whatever, that I'm writing horror, and then they
that's it. it
open
would be
up
a bit,
75,000 words of dick jokes and Jeremy Corbyn.
yeah, I know it would be weird, wouldn't it, if you were having an in-depth conversation with somebody who writes particularly bleak stuff, and then you just segue into sausages and naked attraction again. It's just, it's not always. There's only going to be so much of a market for that.
Yeah. But for some reason, that was the direction that I decided to take. That was the hard left turn. That was not planned, but this is about following the muse and being
Yeah,
authentic.
absolutely.
Apparently, that's authentically me.
That's authentic you. Yeah.
I mean, you've known me for a number of years now, so for some people, they that maybe they know me from interviewing people like Ramsey Campbell and Adam Neville,
Mhm.
and writing Daddy's Boy could seem like a departure. But I think people who know my humor and my personality, I think it kind of fits. It's not that big a left turn.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Nicely segued into left turns again. Yeah, but that one isn't particularly. I think it
Yeah.
was reading House of Bad Memories was kind of I wasn't expecting that after having read your earlier books, but yeah, with Daddy's Boy, it was more yeah, he's hitting his stride with this one. No, I enjoyed it a lot. And just looking at the clock on my computer here, it's just ticked over to 4th of May, so it's tomorrow's release day, isn't it? Is it the 5th of May?
Two more days, 6th for
2 more
May,
days.
because
6th of May.
apparently Tuesday is a good day for publishing calendars, and because obviously I'm hoping to hit the New York Times bestseller
Yeah.
list with
Oh,
Daddy's
I see what
Boy.
you mean there, publishing calendars. Yeah, I thought you meant publishing calendars. Or what? Why is you
No,
publishing
no,
a
no.
calendar?
That
No,
would be a hard left turn. It's like
that would
from
be a hard
horror
left turn.
books to
Yeah,
calendars.
I have to
This
say I've
is
read most of your stuff, but I wouldn't read a Michael Wilson calendar. I wouldn't look at
yeah.
it. It wouldn't be on my
That's just,
wall.
that's just a Dan Howarth holiday snaps calendar, which will ultimately not sell anything unless it's pictures of his pet, and then
Yeah, very true.
it's
Yeah,
gonna make millions.
yeah, yeah. I think
But
I'll just have to write a book about a rabid cat. And see, she's asleep on my printer now. She's
I
come back.
can,
We've put her to
yeah.
sleep.
But House of Bad Memories, I think that was the book where I was just being kind of unapologetically me. I think with the girl in the video, the girl in the video and they're watching, I'm proud of, but there was more writing fearlessly and not giving a fuck with both House of Bad Memories and Daddy's Boy.
Yeah,
And, ironically, there's some people who were with me for the girl in the video that are not, it's not what I'm doing now is really their thing. They'd rather be reading stuff like the girl in the video, but it's definitely the most fearless and the most true to my voice. This kind of dark thriller, weird comedies that I've been fortunate enough to have some Quentin Tarantino and Guy Ritchie comparisons, and
yeah.
that is job done because I love those
Mhm.
people.
You are right though. It's an interesting point because going back to Shadowlocked, it was such a change from the stuff that people are used to from me that a lot of my audience looked at that and thought, well, that's not my bag. I don't want to read that. And I know that there's a bigger audience for it out there somewhere. I just haven't found it yet. So we'll keep hunting. But again, as we've said numerous times in this conversation, you've just got to write what's right for you at the time. And it was obvious to me, knowing you the way that I do, that House of Bad Memories was a book that absolutely needed to be written to maybe exercise a lot of demons or just get rid of a lot of frustration. I'm not sure, but it was very much you pouring yourself out onto the page there.
Yeah, yeah. It was a book of two sides of trauma and misery, one kind of in the latter half of my life, and one that was far more immediate when I was writing it. And, funnily enough, to say weird things as we did with the heart attack, it's almost like the bad thing in my life happened at exactly the right time for finishing that book. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
true.
wish that it hadn't, but it
Yeah,
certainly, brought something to House of Bad Memories that
yeah,
without that happening, like it would be a bit of a different book.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a really important thing as a writer to be able to take the stuff that's happened to you, the good and the bad, and to use those emotions. It gives you you're writing a reality, doesn't it? I think so. Yeah, it's it's a weird conversation to have, that you talking about what you've been through and me what I've been through, and how glad we are they happened in terms of our literary output. Although nothing I do I'd call literary. But yeah,
I think it would
it's
be
a weird one.
generous to call Daddy's Boy literary as
I,
well.
I was
Although,
I was skirting around saying anything there. Did you notice?
I mean, Max Booth did say, if I can find, I'm going to find the quote from Max Booth on Daddy's Boy, because I think that this is a lovely bit of promo that people will definitely want to read the book after reading this. So, one of the things he said was it contains one of the most emotionally significant dick pic scenes captured in literature. So I thought,
There you
well,
go.
thank you very much. Daddy's Boy is literature. That was my first
Yeah.
takeaway. And my
See,
takeaway from your quote was, holy shit, Daddy's Boy is a family comedy. Sit around with the kids and the wife,
but
watch that one.
yeah. No, it's good to grab a little snippet like that and use it completely out of context in publicity. So yeah, that's good. Fair play to Max there. I like that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you said before about, I can't remember if it was your agent or publisher or whoever said it, someone saying to you, oh, why don't you just write something that's more commercial or write something that will sell more? And to go back to that point, I mean, yeah, that's something that I think about a lot. And I think about, the Hollywood method where someone will do one for them, one for the studio.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's something that has eluded me so far. And I think at least with acting, you're given the script. But
Yeah.
here we've got to create it for
You're
probably the
completely
best
in
part of a
control.
year.
Yeah.
So
It's too much of a commitment, isn't it? I think it is anyway.
yeah. I mean, I guess like the real writing equivalent of that would, I suppose, be if somebody gave you a book to edit and they're like, edit this one. Because
Mhm.
then, like you're reading the lines,
Yeah.
you're polishing it up, you're making it better. But yeah, if I'm gonna do one for them, one for me, I need to be a lot fucking quicker at writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I just don't see it. Honestly, I don't see how that would work for me. I'd love to. I need to find that sweet spot between the kind of things that I like writing about and the kind of things that people buy. You see, it's bandied
Yeah,
around on Facebook groups so many times, right to market. I can't do that. I think you should, yeah, I think you're on a hiding to nothing if you're doing that. I think the ideal thing would be to create the market. Do you know what I mean? Be the one that starts the niche.
exactly. Yeah, and the most exciting literature, it wasn't written to market. It was so out of the realms in terms of what the possibilities were, what the market was. You think of Chuck Palahniuk and you think of Kurt Vonnegut. They weren't fucking
Mhm.
writing to market. You look at
No,
Albert
definitely
Camus.
not.
It's these
Mhm.
weird outliers, and I suppose I'd rather take a chance, write something where I might be known for writing this kind of off the wall, weird departure from anything, than just being like, oh, he was a competent thriller writer that paid the bills. He
Yeah,
was one of many. What was it like? Oh well, like
no
any
can.
other kind of thriller that you pick up at an airport.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. It'll pay the bills, but it won't bring creative fulfillment
No,
to me. To
no.
some people, it might, and that's good. If that's you, you write that.
And lucky you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you have any final thoughts or recommendations that you want to leave people with?
Oh man, that's a question for 1:15 in the morning. No, very cheekily, I would just say, please dive onto my website and subscribe to Kemberton. I can subscribe to my mailing list and read Kemberton. I don't know. I think we've said quite a lot in this conversation, which has been absolutely it's bang on. I think we think along the same lines, and it does sound cliched, but it's about being honest to yourself and doing things the right thing for you in the way that it works for you. And certainly that's what I've been doing, and it seems like it's what you're doing as well. So fair play. All I can say to people there in closing is you won't believe Daddy's Boy when you read it. If they want to talk about hard left turns, yeah, there are plenty of hard things in Daddy's Boy. Frozen sausages, all kinds of things, dick pics. It's an interesting one. Just hope it goes really well for you.
I hope so too. All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. It's been good to talk again.
Thank you for listening to This Is Horror Podcast. If you enjoy the show and want to support us, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thisishorror. You'll get early bird access to each and every episode, and you can submit questions to the interviewee. You'll also automatically become a member of the This Is Horror Discord. And every year, there are bonus episodes for patrons only, such as Story Unboxed, the horror podcast on the craft of writing, in which Bob and I, and sometimes a special guest, will dissect a short story or film and let you know writing lessons and takeaways to improve your own writing. Another great way to support us is to leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app or website. And if you want to watch the video version of the This Is Horror podcast, join us on YouTube, youtube.com/@thisishorrorpodcast. You can subscribe there and get notified every time there is a new video. And however you support us, I thank you in advance. Okay, before I wrap up, a quick advert break.
A brutal attack during a peaceful drive through the Irish countryside sets the stage for a grotesque tale of body horror, medical abuse, and occult conspiracy theory. Puppet's Banquet by Valkyrie LaCrue. Clay McLeod Chapman calls it a blissful injury upon the reader's psyche. Fans of Silent Hill, Hellraiser, and Cronenberg's The Brood will be consumed by its exquisite nightmares. Puppet's Banquet, out May 14th. Visit tenebraspress.com for more information. Are you still getting your book recommendations from TikTok? Why, when there's a book containing over 600 horror fiction recommendations written by someone who has read over 3,000 horror novels? That book is called Cracking Spines, 3 Decades of Horror by Jason Cavallero. Cracking Spines has over 30 chapters of ranked lists including Best Monster Novels, Best Folk Horror, Best Slasher Novels, and many more. Cracking Spines by Jason Cavallero is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Well, that's almost it for another episode of This Is Horror. And I really thank you for joining me and indulging me on this wonderful ride as I talk a little bit about Daddy's Boy. And if you have picked it up, I thank you so very much for that. And if you haven't and you're intrigued and you want to hear what a MDW dark comedy is like, then Daddy's Boy is the book for you. There are a number of great reviews coming in already. And I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to Jason White, who left this wonderfully complimentary review on Goodreads. Now, I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to read you the first paragraph and the final paragraph, as I think it's going to give you an insight into who Daddy's Boy is for, and perhaps also, as importantly, who it is not for. So this is from Jason White. I've read all of Michael David Wilson's books that have been published, and Daddy's Boy is my favourite thus far. Daddy's Boy is a crazy ride from beginning to end. It's like the more comedic side of my intrusive thoughts coming to life in book form and displayed nakedly before me. Daddy's Boy isn't for everyone. I'm certain some will be turned off by the book's offbeat and idiosyncratic energy. But it was for me. I highly recommend it, and you'll likely find this one near the top of my 2025 reading list. Well, thank you again to Jason, and thank you to Jason for interviewing me on his YouTube channel and podcast, Jason's Weird Reads. So if you search Jason's Weird Reads on YouTube, you will find the video interview with me there. Alright, well that does it for another episode of This Is Horror. Join me again next time for another fantastic Daddy's Boy tangential episode. But until then, take care of yourselves, be good to one another, read horror, keep on writing, and have a great, great day.
This is Horror Podcast.